Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dali Santana Rhoda. I'm a research assistant with FIU's Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy. I'm also an intelligence fellow with the Intelligence Community Centers for Academic Excellence, where my research has looked into how China is dominating minds across Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, I have the distinct honor of introducing a fireside chat with Michael Jensen. Moderating this session is Randy Pestana. He is the Director for National Security Policy and Strategic Engagement with FIU's Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy. He leads strategic initiatives and enterprise. His expertise includes U.S. foreign policy, civil-military relations, as well as an immense amount of time at the Pentagon driving defense strategy and coordinating interagency efforts. With that, please join me in a round of applause for our distinguished guests.
Thank you. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Michael Jensen. Michael Jensen is the Senior Director for Western Hemisphere Affairs and the Principal Advisor to President Trump on all things Western Hemisphere. I know there's a little bit of audible, but excited to have you here at FIU for this discussion, so please welcome to Miami.
Yeah, thank you for hosting. It's good to be back.
Well, it's great to have this conversation with you. I know a lot of things are going on. But let's start first with the national security strategy. Obviously, the Trump administration released this, framing homeland defense as kind of the key priority. So thinking from your purview as Western Hemisphere lead, how, when you were looking at the national security strategy, did you merge both the Western Hemisphere with the homeland defense mission?
So if you're wondering where the administration's heading, the NSS is a must-read, especially the section on Western Hemisphere, which is very, very well written. Highly recommend it. It was clear that from the president's guidance that the American people were first. And so America first is the guiding principle that goes completely throughout that. And flowing from that, we have to defend the hemisphere to protect the homeland. So a lot of the threats that we see coming into the United States flow through this, and it's not enough to count on the oceans to keep them away anymore. We have to focus on our own hemisphere. And so that went into the prioritization. It's very clear in the document that the Western Hemisphere is preeminent again. And so now we're going through the work of redirecting all of the departments and agencies to refocus. And that's moving people, it's moving money, it's providing guidance, and we're doing all that across the entire government.
Yeah, and one of the other things I found fascinating about the national security strategy, there was a huge emphasis on burden sharing, right? So when you're thinking about partnerships, and we just heard from the Minister of Defense from Argentina, and we had Minister of Defense from Guatemala earlier. What is the argument or conversation you're having with partners across the hemisphere in the roles that they can play and be able to assume some levels of burdens, because the United States can't do everything, right?
So I see this and I think the president sees this as a matter of sovereignty. Sovereignty means something, and it cuts both ways. It both means that you are responsible for your country and should be the decision maker for everything that happens in your border. It also means that you're responsible for exerting that authority throughout your country. So if there are large portions of your country where you can't access, where there are terrorist organizations that are providing government services, where you can't even get your security forces to move into those areas, it seems to be a shortfall on your ability to exert sovereignty over your entire country. So we are happy to help. We are providing a partnership, and I think we'll talk about Shield of Americas a little bit more and what that means. But the burden sharing part of it is, as a minimum, you should be able to provide security for your own people, and you should be able to defend your country. And if your security spending is not equal to your security threats, the United States can't make up that gap for everyone all over the world. We're happy to help and we're happy to contribute, but as your partner, not as a security guarantor for the world.
And have you seen the receptivity among partners in these kind of conversations that you had in terms of, hey, we're there, these are the things we need, support from the United States, or are there countries and leaders, you don't have to get specifics,
right,
but that are saying, I'm going to take a more pronounced leadership role and we just need support in this area?
Well, as you mentioned, it's country by country, but I think it's a realistic ask to ask countries to defend their own territory. And depending on the leader, I think it's an easy case to make, that we're here to help. We're not here to provide all the security for everyone. And so we see different leaders taking this transition period more aggressively. But that's kind of a prerequisite for us to come help, and it is the first step for us to pile in behind you. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thinking about the partnership piece, right? Earlier this year, you had the America's Counter Cartel Conference hosted at Southcon by Secretary Hegseth that immediately preceded the President's SHIELD Summit of the Americas. You attended both, obviously. What were some of the key themes and kind of the discussions that you had with not just the ministers of defense and foreign ministers, but also the presidents that were there with President Trump at SHIELD?
So first, the America's Counter Cartel Conference is a military coalition. So that's run out of Southcon, and that's a coalition of countries that have one issue, and that issue is fighting cartels with military force. And so the way that the president sees multilaterals is, instead of putting a large group together and quibbling about the details and things you disagree with, to just organize around a single principle. So for HSC, that is military force against cartels. It's a huge problem for the United States, killing hundreds of thousands of people, but it's also a massive problem for the region. And it's a transnational problem. They don't respect the lines on the map, and so we have to work between those lines on the map, between countries, sharing intelligence, sharing capabilities, working together to get after these networks that span the entire hemisphere. So that's what HSC is all about. And that is through Department of War, headquartered in Southcom, and those countries are already starting to collaborate together and build coalitions in border areas in order to work together across the lines and share information. Some of these countries don't even share between services. And we've done a lot of work in the United States intelligence community, even establishing ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, to fuse all those intelligence, I'm steeped in acronyms, to fuse all those together, and some of that work hasn't been done in some of our partner nations. You'll see the Air Force not sharing with the Navy. So this cartel coalition, being headquartered in Southcom, we're able to share a lot of our lessons learned on building a true joint interagency task force and sharing everything together within the country and then between countries. And that is off to a roaring start. General Donovan is incredible. I just spent the morning with him, and there's a lot of work to do there and a lot of willing partners. Separate from SHIELD of the Americas, which is a tighter coalition, but also more aligned on more things. So the SHIELD of the Americas is countries that are more aligned politically. They're aligned with us economically, and the ability to create an environment to attract U.S. investment, and also across a broad range of security issues.
Yeah, and understanding, obviously, you got to get the main thing first, right? What is the plan to kind of expand that coalition? Obviously, you want to start with the set group of partners, but is there plans, I'm sure there are, to expand that coalition over the next year, 2, 3 years left in the administration?
Absolutely. We'd love to see every country in the hemisphere join, but to join for purpose. So you have to sign on to the specific goal and objectives of that group. We're not trying to grow it so we can put all the flags up and brag about how many people are there. It's only people who are really aligned and sign on to those objectives.
So one thing that ASW Humeyer talked about earlier was the ability to balance the Iran conflict, and I'm sure in the White House you're seeing a lot of this with the prioritization in the national security strategy of the Western Hemisphere. So how are those conversations happening in the Eisenhower building and other spaces with the president in terms of prioritization of the mission in Iran, but also the prioritization of the Western Hemisphere and the homeland?
Well, I'll say it's a big government. So despite what happens in the Middle East, there's still thousands of us who are laser focused on the Western Hemisphere, and our foot has not come off the gas one bit. So the president puts people in charge, he gives them clear direction, and then he moves on to the next thing. But that laser beam of focus is going to come back, because he does always come back and check in. And when he checks in, you need to have progress to show. So nobody has let up at all. Even though Iran is consuming the news cycle, I don't care what the news says. I'm focused on accomplishing the president's objective in the Western Hemisphere, and there's tons of people across the government that are in the same place. So the principals, they will focus on the most important thing, the most critical thing, and that's why they have the rest of us to keep moving out on the president's objectives all over the world.
So this week, unbeknownst to a lot of folks here, but the Chiefs of Mission is occurring this week at Southcom. You were there. Secretary Rubio was there earlier this week. National Security Advisor Rubio for your case, right? What kind of conversations, without specifics of course, were you all having in terms of the future direction of U.S. engagement and partnership across the region?
It's mostly centers around the execution of the national security strategy and the national defense strategy. And so for the NSS, the next phase that we're really focused on right now is jump-starting all the investment and the economic activity and the trade activity between the United States and across the region. We have a lot of dry powder. DFC is $200 billion to spend. EXIM has $135 billion to spend. The Office of Strategic Capital at DOW has $200 billion. We need to get that obligated. We're looking for bankable deals. We're looking to get very involved economically across the hemisphere to build those relationships, those long-term business relationships that guarantee our relationships into the future. And we are working to be the better partner. We want to be the partner of choice across the board. And so that means a lot of these countries working with them to help them understand some of the things that are making them uninvestable, some of the things that are driving off opportunity and cost. And then it's up to them. They can change the structure, or it's going to be very, very difficult to do business in those countries. And we're seeing a lot of openness to that, especially when it's followed up with capital and it's followed up with support from the administration to encourage companies to go down there. On the other side, we're trying to change the incentive structure with our laws and our regulations to make it much, much easier for U.S. companies to go down there and work.
So thinking about that, something you said about business investment and the investment within the region, obviously there's a number of conditions that lead to that. So I go back to the NSS and thinking about the return of the Monroe Doctrine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the pushing against Chinese investments, particularly in critical infrastructure. Think Panama Canal, think critical minerals across the Western Hemisphere. We're not playing on equal terms, right? The Chinese will invest even at a loss to be able to advance their own strategic gains.
Yep.
How can we, the United States, compete in that space and incentivize private sector investment beyond just the government institutions and the international banks to support our regional partners?
So there's the Monroe Doctrine and then the three corollaries. So the original Monroe Doctrine was about colonialism. The first corollary was about control of ports. The second corollary was about communism and keeping that out. I think the Trump corollary, or the Monroe Doctrine, is about commerce. It's about building those long-term trade relationships. And so we're focused on the critical infrastructure. We're focused on end-to-end supply chains. We're focused on getting real good investment against solid U.S. companies to get down there and compete. What we saw is all of these tenders that would go out, and you'd have 3 overseas bidders and no American companies there. So I spent a lot of time over the last year talking to American companies to figure out why that is, and trying to change the incentive structure to make it more attractive for them to deploy capital in these strategic projects in important locations. So some of this is being open to creative deal structures. DFC now has, they have a large chunk of money set aside specifically for equity deals. So in some of these countries where they tend to go back and forth between different types of government and you have a fear of expropriation, now you have the U.S. taxpayer in your cap stack, and so they have to go against the actual U.S. government to expropriate your property. That's just one of the changes that we're making to try and make it, to try and de-risk investing in these strategic projects. We do have a lot of money, but it pales in comparison to what's in the private sector. So we're trying to be the anchor investor to get private capital to pile in behind us, because that's really the answer.
So thinking about switching gears a little bit, it links to private investment, but January 3rd, Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're in Miami, so there's a lot of interest here in Venezuela. But what was the reaction from the region, right? Because historically, obviously, there's been a history of perception about U.S. Influence in the region and the proactive influence, and it brings back memories associated with the Cold War. At the same time, no one in the region is questioning whether Maduro was a good guy or bad. Everybody knows he was a horrible human being, right? So what kind of reception have you had regarding post-January 3rd and the conversations regarding Venezuela?
What happened on January 3rd?
The removal of Maduro, right?
I'm giving you a hard time. After that law enforcement action to remove Maduro, who was not a recognized head of state. He was a fugitive from justice. It's been overwhelmingly positive. Venezuela was a huge problem that was spreading trouble all the way through the region, and now we're in the process of moving through phases. The stabilization will continue through the whole thing. And then now we've just, with the arrival of CDA Barrett, moving into the second phase of recovery. And so now we are working on restarting that economic engine. So, since we're in the Adam Smith Center here, I think that the philosophical underpinnings of that is that there's economic activity that funds the security apparatus. The security apparatus supports the rule of law. The rule of law creates an environment where investors feel safe coming in there, which increases economic activity. And that's Adam Smith's virtuous cycle. And that is what we're trying to get restarted with the partners that are available to keep Venezuela stable and operating, keep the lights on, keep the security forces paid, keep everything moving, just enough so we can get some economic activity, so we can start help the country to recover. Then we have to rebuild the election system from the ground up, starting from national ID through rebuilding the institutions, and we're working very hard on that right now to get those election systems built to the point where when an election happens, everyone trusts it. The people of Venezuela, the international community, everyone knows that it was a free and fair and open election. That's going to take some work.
So thinking about not just Venezuela, but the region, and we're going fast, we don't have a lot of time here, so I do apologize, but thinking about some of the challenges, right? One of the challenges we heard at the America Counter Cartel Conference was technology and digitalization, and a number of, need for UAS, need for scanners, need for technology investment. What challenges do you see, not just in the technological space, cyberspace, which is a place that the Chinese are playing a large role in the region, but broader in terms of other security impacts that is not as pronounced as transnational criminal organizations or designated terrorist organizations?
Well, we've been changing up our foreign military sales quite a bit over the last few months. Our military equipment is not the best fit for most countries. Our military equipment is built for $1 trillion military, and there's not a lot of those around the world. So a lot of the things that are gold-plated make it a bad fit for other places. And so what we're looking at is that second tier of military companies, especially the up-and-coming companies that are building very innovative equipment that bring a lot of the same capability at a lower price point. And what we might call attritable or semi-attritable in the United States military is actually an awesome solution that brings a ton of capability at a much lower price point, easier to maintain, and easier to replace when you need it. So our defense industrial base is recovering to try and build some of these big gold-plated things, but there's this whole ramp of incredible, innovative new things that we're trying, and we're trying to get those into the FMS pipeline as soon as possible because they're ready for delivery now. So I think building that capability helps a lot of these countries. There's a lot of countries that have been waiting for years to get some of this equipment so that they can go and fight DTOs, and we tell them, you need to do more, and they're like, we're waiting for our gear to arrive, right? So we're trying to solve that problem there, and then also I think through HSC, like I mentioned, that intelligence sharing and sharing tactics and techniques and procedures. Even bringing in advisors on the ground to teach and train, and then we're bringing a ton of people into the United States also to train, to just raise the level of capability across all of our partners in the hemisphere.
Yeah, that reminds me, the defense industrial base, and it's not specific to the NDSS, but the NDDS was very adamant about revitalizing the defense industrial base and focus on being able to meet the demands, in a year as opposed to waiting 5 years and stuff like
Absolutely.
that. So what are some of the initiatives that you're seeing in terms of supporting kind of the DIB environment, particularly as it relates to getting equipment to partners in the region?
So first funding. Giving them, trying to do multi-year contracts so that the DIB can plan out farther in advance and everything's not an emergency at the last minute. And that would be a better question for Joe because he's more in that day-to-day. I'm just trying to do the interagency coordination in between Department of War and other agencies. But I know from a top level, increasing the funding, doing multi-year contracts, and just being more predictable in our orders and our requests so that they can build the capacity and know that it's not going to be wasted capacity.
So thinking about SHIELD, again, I know you just had a conversation recently with Secretary Noem. You've been working closely with her in her new role as Special Envoy. What can we, the audience, and those watching online kind of anticipate over the next few months in terms of key efforts, key initiatives, and kind of the direction that SHIELD is taking?
So she just wrapped up her talk right before I came over here, so I have the latest on SHIELD.
Breaking news, by the way.
She is very excited about the role. She's completely committed to the Western Hemisphere and to serving the president and accomplishing his objectives. So she will be specifically managing the relationship of the SHIELD countries and building this into a very strong coalition. The membership, as I mentioned, is open. We would love to see more countries choose to align with us. But I think the SHIELD countries will be at the front of the line for investment, for helping solve their problems, to just being good partners because we're stronger, much stronger together, especially resisting non-hemispheric influence because we can all partner together on things. And so it makes it harder to pick us off one at a time when we have that SHIELD out in front of the hemisphere. So you should see a lot more from SHIELD coming up. She is building it from the ground up, so she's laying all the groundwork right now, and I think you'll start to see some of those initiatives come out, and it will be a coalition of like-minded nations, and so you'll see the same messaging from us. You'll see the same priorities from us. We have all specifically chosen that group because they chose to align with us and support us publicly and privately. So we're very excited about the direction that SHIELD's going. And it will be, mainly, like the NSS says, to build a Western Hemisphere that's safer, stronger, and more prosperous.
With that note, any final messages that you'd like to share with our audience, not just here, but the hundreds that are watching online across the hemisphere in terms of the Trump administration message to the region? Absolutely.
I would say right now we're looking for deals. We're looking for bankable deals that are investable, that we can start to deploy this capital from all those pots of money that I just mentioned, and then increase the strength and the resiliency of the Western Hemisphere. Projects we're looking at, like you mentioned here before, are the infrastructure projects, the technology projects, agriculture and trade, all of those things that we want to build, and we want to get those north-south trade routes really established and solidified so that we're all on the same page and we have all those things in common. We want to be the partner of choice. We're going to make you a better deal.
Sir, well, I appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us here at the Hemispheric Security Conference, and you're welcome back anytime.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And then I think we got a picture.